What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the BlockHash podcast, your number one source for all that is happening across the emerging tech scene. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. Today, I'm joined by another exciting guest, Rena, COO of Trust Machines, the largest ecosystem of Bitcoin applications to maximize the value of the Bitcoin network. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to dive into Trust Machines and chat with Rena. So, Rena, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you here. To kick things off, I'm sure people would love to get a little bit more about your background, maybe your personal story, how you kind of ended up in the Web3 world, what drove your fascination for Bitcoin. I know everyone in this space has an interesting story. So, what's your story?
My Bitcoin journey started about 10, maybe a little longer than 10 years ago. I actually learned about Bitcoin in 2012. So, fairly early. At the time, I was working in oil. So, I'm a drilling engineer and I worked offshore with oil companies operating drill ships and such, and actually like physically drilling for oil. So, I learned about Bitcoin, ironically, from a TV show while out in the rigs because you can't do anything when you're out on the rigs. And it was Good Wife. And there was this episode where they were prosecuting Satoshi, or who was Satoshi, and how they created digital money in a digital commodity. And something within me clicked because I work in a physical commodity space for oil. And the idea that you can extract value from anything and create a market just really intrigued me. And then that same night, like while in my little drill ship dorm, I don't know what else to call it, I started researching Bitcoin and I saw about the energy consumption of Bitcoin, how to mine Bitcoin. And I was so curious from there on out. Within a week, I set up a GPU miner on my work laptop at that time and started mining for Bitcoin right out on the rigs. And from there on out, it was done. There was no turning back.
Interesting. From drilling oil to mining Bitcoin. I haven't heard that one before. That's quite a unique story.
One commodity for another.
And then what kind of led from that point on to you being a part of Trust Machines? Was there an introduction in between, or did you stumble upon it, or were you a part of it when it was being put together, or what's that kind of origin story like?
So, like, after I had left oil and was mining Bitcoin and such, I started creating my first mining pool. So, I did a green energy forward mining pool, given, I just came from the other side of being in a technically dirty oil, the way people think about it. And so, I started a mining pool out from solar panels and such and kind of went in that direction. And as I was working and creating this mining pool, I got quite a few consulting gigs and helping other oil companies actually learn to mine Bitcoin with their flare gas, recapture, and go that route. And so I had this like interesting journey of becoming a energy and mining expert pretty quickly because there weren't that many people kind of going in that direction. And while I was there, I really wanted to work more so on a product. And so I joined Ember Fund fairly early on. It was a crypto app that allows you to invest Bitcoin like a hedge fund, kind of opening up the idea that anybody should have managed portfolios. And from there, I went on to a stablecoin project. And then right after that, actually, CZ picked me up and I joined Binance in 2019, I believe. Yeah, 2019, and I joined Binance US to actually run the US ops. A long crypto journey, and when I was ready to leave Binance after spending a number of years on the exchange side, I always felt the story wasn't finished for Bitcoin. We hold it, we value it, but we never did anything with it. And so the idea of building products on Bitcoin really appealed to me, and I had reached out to Manib, and that was it.
Absolutely. So what are you guys aiming to do with it now? With Trust Machines, what would you say is maybe more or less your guys' core mission and what you're trying to achieve?
What we really want to do is see Bitcoin actually used on chain. So, Bitcoin is not a rock. We shouldn't treat it just as a store of value, but it should be considered a productive asset. If you think Bitcoin is the most pristine asset in your lifetime, in that vein, it's probably the best collateral you're ever going to have in your lifetime because the value keeps appreciating. And so, we are very bullish on the idea of Bitcoin used in DeFi or Bitcoin Fi and such. And so we build products like lending protocols, we incubate other investments like Bitcoin dexes and things like that. And we have a Bitcoin wallet because we fundamentally want to see more Bitcoin used on chain and not necessarily left in cold storage ETFs.
So are you guys like aiming to build an ecosystem for applications for Bitcoin? Is that the best way to kind of look at it? Because I know that that's also something that's really popular now these days. Everyone's trying to figure out. We always looked at Bitcoin as either a payment method or a store of value, but now it's like this fundamental idea of we can build on it now, right? And we
I
can.
mean, we should build on it. And it's like
Mhm.
ironic because I think a lot of people kind of took just like the Bitcoin white paper at face value of like peer to peer electronic cash and nothing more. But if you go back to Satoshi's chats from like 2010 on the chat server for Satoshi Chat, you could see kind of him, he or she at this point, unclear who Satoshi is. You could see they're putting responses of Bitcoin should be the best secure base layer that you build on top of. And so they seeded the idea of Bitcoin L2s and Bitcoin products as early as 2010, but no one really kind of grasped at that concept. And the way that I've always viewed it is Bitcoin is the best base layer to build on. It's the most decentralized network. It's the hardest asset. And quite frankly, it's the only asset kind of blockchain that has yet to be hacked. And so there is a Lindy effect in there. But there are limitations by design, right? Bitcoin doesn't have smart contracts. You have limited script. There are soft fork potentials through Opcat or BitVM or things like that that might give Bitcoin more functionality, but it's never going to have kind of the robust script of what you get in an EVM or MoveVM or Solana VM. And so you had to develop Bitcoin layer twos in order to bring that functionality on Bitcoin. And so the layer two that we've chosen to build with is on Stacks, but there are other layer twos out there as well. But fundamentally, I think that as Bitcoin appreciates in value, you're not going to want to just spend it in every day. So for me, the payments kind of mechanism story dies.
Why do you think that was? The fact that there's a chat about it, 10 years ago, and that there's a little bit of knowledge there that it could have been done. Is it just fear that it might affect the network, or is it just people wanting to explore things at a base layer level before L2s, really became popular? Or what kind of prevented people from doing that on Bitcoin prior, since it was a discussion point?
I think the idea of just building like scripting language and such really held it back. Like, remember, 2010 is like well before the idea of like Ethereum and EVM even came about. So no one really knew kind of, you could have a blockchain, which is a ledger for transaction, but no one really thought about like what more you can build on top. And the idea of actual products never really came about until like more of the 20, I don't know, 13, 14 era. Actually, all of the earliest innovations in crypto actually happened on Bitcoin. You have colored coins and rare pepes, like all of those ideas of creating images or artwork on Bitcoin or creating the first stable coin via the Omni network, which is built on Bitcoin. All of this happened like well before EVM, but I think the idea of building something with a finite value, because Bitcoin is fixed at 21 million, does make it difficult. So you had to see beyond that you might need another asset, particularly for gas, to be able to do these types of things, which I think was really contrarian at that time.
And then how does Trust Machines kind of envision these layers for Bitcoin in terms of building out, further security for a foundation for Web3, decentralization? Do these things involve, things that we're familiar with, like Lightning Network, for example, or Stacks, or is this an exploratory, let's find other things?
So we pretty much almost build all of our products on stacks. We've done pretty deep security analysis and even like just business fundamentals of what layer could have traction. We think Lightning is really good for payments, but if you're an everyday person trying to operate Lightning channels, it's difficult. Like, ironically, I was the person who turned off Lightning for Binance US many years ago before it actually came back on because managing state channels is difficult of moving liquidity. But when you think about what functionality you want, is you want something that developers want to use and want to build products on. And so it needs to be in a language that they feel comfortable with and have kind of the robust scripting functionality that you would expect as an everyday developer coming into Web3 for the first time. And so that's somewhat why we chose Stacks. But I think if you really look under the hood between all the different layers for Bitcoin L2s, what mattered to me in particular for how we build a product is, does the L2 actually contribute back to the L1? So I'm pretty outspoken about this, but most L2s do not actually pay transaction fees on the L1. So you're not securing the base layer and paying Bitcoin miners, which is the entire purpose of this whole thing of, if you want Bitcoin to remain dominant and have value, then you need to continue to pay your fees and secure the L1 and make sure miners have a job to do. And so Stacks is one of the few layers that not only use Bitcoin for the data availability layer, as well as kind of the state native state of reading and writing to Bitcoin. But the consensus mechanism makes a Bitcoin transaction every time a Stacks block is produced. And that's what mattered to me, is making sure that we are adding back to the network no matter what. But I don't think a lot of layers actually do that. There are merge mining, which also does in this direction. So Rootstock would be a good example too of a layer that we very much considered working on building on as well. But if you look at a lot of the newer ones, especially the ones that are more kind of EVM centric, they don't actually add value back to Bitcoin L1. And I think that's a fundamental problem.
Absolutely. Aside from those ones, are there any other potential solutions that could be fundamentally very beneficial for Bitcoin as a layering solution, or anything that maybe most people haven't heard of before that also might kind of be out there on the fringe?
I think I'm actually kind of bullish on some of the kind of newer innovations coming just on the L1 itself. So OpCat will allow for kind of more functionality of scripts that are already available in Bitcoin that just haven't been enabled, so that you could do more expresses smart contract light on Bitcoin L1. So it could power things like lending protocols based on like DLCs or things like that. So I'm bullish on that. I've been highly kind of anticipating the research for BitVM2, which allows you to go to like a trustless state for Bitcoin and seeing how that ties in with L2s. So that's something that's interesting to me. We've kind of looked all across the board between many other L2s and such, but I think for me, fundamentally, it needs to feel like proof of work. It needs to feel like a roll up to Bitcoin. If you're kind of going in a different direction, whether it be proof of stake or something else, it kind of defeats the purpose of Bitcoin. And that's why Bitcoin is special to every other asset class of there is hard compute actually backing it every single day for miners solving the challenging problems so that they can actually mine the block. And I, I feel like the industry actually undervalues that because we've seen everything go to alternate layer ones or kind of roll ups in EVM or things like that. But no one really comes back to think of like why Bitcoin is actually successful. And I think that's part of the reason behind it.
Yeah, I think that's a very true statement because we've gone so far into this multi-chain ecosystem and everyone's trying to build out this version of a blockchain, this version of consensus, this version of decentralization. Some things aren't even blockchains. And then some things are so hyper modular. It's like, is it even, a
Is it
blockchain? Is
worth
it
it?
even, yeah, if you can take all the pieces and interchange them for other things and make them do all these multifaceted approaches, it's like, we're getting so far away from what Bitcoin was. It's like, where are we going?
And like Bitcoin isn't the solution for everything. I'm like not naive enough to think the entire world will be on Bitcoin and the entire financial system will be on Bitcoin. But I do think there's something valuable in the idea of something built on proof of work, has compute behind it, has not been hacked. I think that is like the understory of the year of Bitcoin hasn't been hacked. And if you want to build another blockchain like system, why would you not consider something as like a roll up to proof of work and go in that direction? Because it is more secure and you can actually maintain decentralization versus kind of the multitude of staking that we've gone for instead.
Absolutely. And I think part of that was everyone wanted like one chain to build everything on in the
I get
beginning. And now that we have, again, this multi-chain ecosystem where there's so many different chains that are very good at specific things, it's like people can now kind of come back to Bitcoin. And I think we're starting to see that appreciation. They're like, okay, let's build some novel use cases for Bitcoin and things that we can build on top of it and take advantage of the chain because now we don't have the whole weight of let's put the whole world on top of it.
I think that's fair because, like, if you want to build something on the fastest chain, you likely will go to Solana. If you want to build something that has kind of the most expressive environment, you might have gone to something in the EVM world. If you're looking for something IP related, you probably will build on Story. But the way I view it, if you're looking for something that has real value and hard money, you're only going to do something with Bitcoin.
Absolutely. In terms of building, what are some of the things that are starting to be developed in terms of products or use cases on top of it in Bitcoin's new ecosystem? I've seen things like Leather, which I think is a wallet, Dot Locker, Granite. Um, what are some things that are popping up that maybe you're excited about or that show the potential for what can be done here?
I think Granite is my favorite product that I've ever got to build and work on and contribute to as a core contributor. So Granite is a lending platform on Bitcoin powered by the Stack-Cell2. So you can actually take a decentralized on-chain loan against your Bitcoin. And why I feel like particularly bullish about this is that you can do lending in a centralized venue and kind of get wrecked in the way that you did on BlockFi or Celsius and such. We're seeing kind of a new reboot of that kind of this year with Coinbase's Morpho and Strike starting lending. But they're not always like 100% decentralized and on chain and transparent. And what we did kind of in creating Granite is we built a really clean, a really vanilla lending platform that all you can do is borrow against your Bitcoin and nothing more. But what I like about our protocol is that we took kind of the nods of what you would expect in something of the security in TradFi and brought it back to on-chain. So when you are taking out a loan on Granite, you are not liquidated the entire value. You're only liquidated to your health ratio till you're back in the clear, and then you can continue on with your loan. We have things like notifications. So you actually get notifications on your loans in DeFi, which is a simple but novel concept because whenever you've used a Aave or others, you don't actually get Telegram notifications on your loan health. So just really simple things. But I think it allows us to unlock, there's $1 trillion plus in Bitcoin. Most of us have some amount of Bitcoin. We never want to sell our Bitcoin fundamentally. So now you can take liquidity against it and actually go beyond on your day of whether you want to arb on perps or leverage or actually just use the stable coin to take out something that you need for everyday life like buy a house. And I'm really bullish on the platform we've built.
Do you imagine any sort of application maybe taking precedent in terms of the types that will be built on Bitcoin, whether it's like DeFi based or NFTs or liquidity for those that are in fintech or, whatever it may be, gaming, there's so many different things being built everywhere. What do you think might proliferate the most on Bitcoin as the ecosystem continues to flourish?
I think it's probably going to have to be like Bitcoin DeFi, Bitcoin Fi. Like Bitcoin just has so much value that it is a pristine collateral form. And it's one of the only collateral forms that anybody in the world can access. You still don't have to KYC. And so anybody can get Bitcoin. I think some of the more novel use cases that I personally am interested in is using kind of Bitcoin for provenance for identity. As kind of the world of AI agents and such kind of rise, you're going to need something to verify your actual identity on chain. And I don't see why you wouldn't want to do it on the chain that is the most difficult to hack. So I would see something like that on Bitcoin. In terms of NFTs, I think we've gone through a lot of cycles with ordinals and such, but I don't think like as an industry we use ordinals well. So most people just think of ordinals as JPEG image PFP, nothing really more than that. But if you actually think about what an ordinal is, it's about allowing you to actually put a data file on the Bitcoin blockchain and store it. That's actually pretty powerful. And so something that I done as an ordinal is I inscribed all the voicemails that I had of my dad after he died because I don't want to lose these voicemail files, right? They're right now owned by Apple, but now they live on chain. So if anything happens to my phone or iCloud, my kids will get to see my dad's voice.
I love that. I think that's really cool. I definitely want to do something for their for myself too on Bitcoin. So I think it would live forever. I think it'd be something
It's
really
the greatest
special.
way to preserve a legacy is on the Bitcoin blockchain, but no one
Mhm.
really thinks about it like that. We just think of value of BTC, the asset, but think about the chain itself.
This kind of leads into the next question, and we did discuss this a little earlier, but it's about the future here of Bitcoin. And I'm curious from your perspective where you think this might go in terms of, not just what we can build, but, can it scale in the same way, eventually through maybe L2's different layers that Ethereum and Solana, for example, have been able to do over time? Is Bitcoin, do you think it'll be something that's a bit more niche based? That isn't, about scale, but about longevity and security? Or where do you kind of see this new ecosystem for Bitcoin going down the line 5, 10, 15 years later when it eventually evolves?
I think we'll see scaling like primarily in the financial sector. Like I actually think that with all the governments buying Bitcoin strategic reserves and now we're in kind of terra forest across the world, I would not be surprised if a government is actually taking out loans against their Bitcoin sooner or later to pay their national debt down. Like I do think like when you think of the asset class, Bitcoin is the only thing that has gotten mass market maturation and such. Now you have every ETF being able to sell Bitcoin. You have S&P 500 like Coinbase and others now because they're in the S&P 500, they're basically forcing S&P to actually buy Bitcoin. And so I think there's going to be a whole world of different kind of structured financial products built on Bitcoin because of the value that it's created. But I also think there's something in it of the mystery about Bitcoin. No one really knows who Satoshi is. No one knows who is the face behind it. Kind of gives the allure that you want to continue to build with it. And so 10 to 15 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see like a kind of hyper Bitcoinization economy. It won't be Bitcoin in your everyday life. Like I don't see that the narrative of buying your coffee with Bitcoin is dead, but I do think it's seeing kind of the narrative of actually powering like massive money movements, remittances, stablecoins on Bitcoin, all of these things built on the chain would be massive.
Absolutely. I think Steak and Shake is now accepting Bitcoin
I
like
heard.
nationwide in the US. So even though Bitcoin might not be the best for payments anymore, I'm still going to try it.
I mean, I'm down. Let's go grab a burger and figure this out. But I've seen a lot of places where you can do Bitcoin payments around the world. When I can do a Bitcoin payment via stablecoin on Bitcoin, that's, I think, kind of the massive unlock because then you have decentralized everyday money still secured by Bitcoin. So no one can interfere, no government can infringe on your rights. And that would actually be the people's money.
Absolutely. And for that, I hope that Satoshi also stays anonymous forever too. I think that's something that lends so much value to Bitcoin is this true belief that it's the people's money, that there isn't a person or a group or an entity or a government really behind it. So I hope that, we never find out.
Bitcoin would not be where it is without every single person contributing every day, whether you're contributing to Bitcoin Core or making Bitcoin education like you are today. I think it its value is not necessarily 100% derived from proof of work, but it's derived around the people behind it and how much passion that we have on democratizing money so that everybody can have access. Like Bitcoin was created so that you can have trust without centralization. And that's the most important factor. And given the state of affairs of today, I think the idea of still continuing on a decentralized path it rings more true today than what it even did during the financial crisis when Bitcoin was kind of derived as a concept.
Rena, this has been a really good conversation to kind of start wrapping up the episode. What's kind of next for Trust Machines going into the rest of this year? What's on your guys' roadmap? Any new exciting developments that you guys are working on, things people should be aware of? And then in line with that, also, you guys going to be at any events, conferences, engagements where people can kind of interact with you guys? What should we know?
Absolutely. So our wallet leather is going to mobile probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So end of May is our target for a mobile launch. So the idea of actually having a full functioning Bitcoin mobile wallet, I know it seems novel, but there's actually not that many Bitcoin only wallets on mobile where you can track your portfolios, access DeFi, find kind of yield farming opportunities if that's something that's interesting to you, and then still have a place to hold all your ordinals and collectibles. So I am super excited for Leather Mobile, so that's coming out in just a couple weeks. On Granite, our lending protocol, we will remove kind of all the beta hard caps and allow the floodgates to open for anybody and everyone to take out a loan. So, very excited about that. We're expecting some new LPs coming in, some institutional, a lot of retail, so a really good, healthy mix. And then, kind of really what goes from there is really just to scale and grow kind of Bitcoin 5 for everybody. Most people take kind of a very narrow focus approach, but Trust Machines, we want to have Bitcoin accessible to retail and institutions alike. And so we build products for every end of the spectrum. And then conference wise, we are Vegas bound in 2 weeks. There's quite a few events that we're putting on, some for the lending focus, some for the more policy oriented, and some just for the vibes. Bitcoin vibes are high, so everybody should be in Vegas. And then from there on out, ironically, after Permissionless, we will be the only project presenting at ETHCC on why Bitcoin is better than Ethereum.
Awesome. You'll be at Permissionless, right?
We will be.
Awesome. I'll be there too. I'll be doing interviews.
Can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, let's connect while we're there, 100%. And then what's the website, socials, community? Where can people go to keep up with everything?
Find us on X. Our handle is at trustmachine.co, Leather BTC or Granite BTC, and then mine is just my name.
Awesome. Rena, really appreciate you taking the time today. It's been great learning more about what you guys are doing with Trust Machines and also what's coming of this new Bitcoin ecosystem. And it's very exciting to see. And it makes me very happy too. Someone that's been around the space for a very long time. I'm sure you have for quite a while as well. But to see it, come back to Bitcoin a little bit and see the things being built and the layering and the growth is quite remarkable. So appreciate all the work you do.
We're returning back to fundamentals. The world will operate on Bitcoin. That's it. Thank you
Absolutely.
for having me.
Likewise. We'll talk soon. Take care and hopefully see you permissionless.
Take care.